I like a proportional tax because proportionality is based on biblical principles of tithing. You make $10 billion a year, you pay $1 billion. You make $10 a year, you pay $1. But you get exactly the same rights.
Dr. Ben Carson, during our interview, talking about tax reform based on the tithe. Welcome back to Newsmax Prime. You know, just today, Mike Huckabee made his announcement, came out again for the fair tax. Ted Cruz has been talking about a flat tax. What kind of tax reform plan do we really need? Joining us to discuss taxation and the state of our economy, the chief economist at the Heritage Foundation, Stephen Moore, who joins us from Newsmax, New York. We should also note Stephen is a columnist, and he's the co-author of this book, An Inquiry into the Nature and Causes of the Wealth of States, How Taxes, Energy, and Worker Freedom Change Everything. And no, he wasn't paid by the words on the title there. Stephen Moore, it's great to have you here on Newsmax Prime.
Hi, JD.
All this talk
Hi,
about
JD.
tax
Great to be with
reform, it's great to have you. We're hearing from all the candidates.
Yeah.
From your perspective, what's the best kind of tax reform?
Well, first of all, I'm amazed. I finally found somebody who's to the right of me on taxes, and that's Ben Carson. You know, I've been talking about a 15 to 20% flat tax, and it sounds like he's at 10%. So good for him. And look, I think we're going to have all of these candidates on the Republican side of the aisle. I'm in New York today. I had breakfast with Jeb Bush. I think a lot of these candidates are going to come up with very ambitious types of tax systems that you tried to do when you were in Congress, JD. And that is basically a big debate whether we have a flat tax, with a postcard return on the income tax, or something even more ambitious, as you mentioned, the fair tax, which is a national sales tax where there'd be no tax forms at all. I'd take either one of them. It's like asking if I'd rather have a Porsche or a Rolls Royce.
Hey, just one thing. If you had breakfast this morning with Jeb Bush, I'm curious. He's not going to sign Grover Norquist's no tax pledge. In other words, come out against raising taxes. A lot of candidates signed that just as reflexively as breathing. Did Jeb talk about that any this morning?
That was not brought up in this meeting. It was an off-the-record thing. But I will simply say this: having him heard, talk before about this, his position is, look, I cut taxes when I was governor, and I don't have to take this no tax pledge. I disagree with them on that, but he was quite a good governor, and I do think he's going to come out with a pretty ambitious tax reform plan too. We'll see.
Well, we've got about 3 minutes remaining, and Stephen, there's a lot we could talk to you about. And while it's unanimous, at least with us here, we want lower taxes and tax reform, we have to talk about the state of America's economy right now. Gas prices have come down from just a year ago. Inflation is below levels associated with a healthy economy. Where are we now? Is this the calm before yet another economic storm?
Sure could be. I mean, if you look at here's what really worries me. We've got these record low interest rates, JD, and yet we have this $18 trillion national debt. Now, I don't want to scare people, but what happens if those interest rates start to go up back, not even to the 1970s levels, but just normal interest rates that we've had, throughout the last 60 or 70 years? That huge increase in interest rates would mean the federal government would have to pay hundreds of billions of dollars more each year in interest payments, and then interest would become the single largest item in our expenditure. And we'd pay more for interest on the debt than we'd pay for our national security, for Medicare, for Social Security. That's something that really worries me, JD, because do we really want to pay half of our taxes just to pay for interest on the debt? That's the direction that we're headed.
Stephen, we would be remiss if we did not point out that you have written a great article for the latest edition of Newsmax magazine, and in that article...
I love writing for you guys.
And we're glad to have you in there. Next time, we're going to have to put you on the cover. That look good. You look good on the cover, Steve. But what you wrote in there, 5 reasons to fear the economic bubble is about to burst, you outlined one of those things. We've got about a minute remaining. What else should we be concerned about at this juncture, Stephen Moore?
The runaway entitlements in Washington. And again, this is something, JD, you fought against when you were in Washington, and nobody's really done anything about these programs. And we know the biggest factor that's affecting our economy is that every day something like 10,000 baby boomers are retiring. Within 10 years, you're going to have tens of millions of people retired collecting these checks, and I'm not sure we can afford that. And here's the amazing thing. We can see this Titanic headed to this iceberg, JD, and no nobody in Washington in either party wants to do anything about it. That's the kind of thing that keeps me up at night.
Well, we appreciate the fact that you have come here to sound the warning. Stephen Moore, I've always appreciated your work. And again, I want to get
JD,
the title.
Why does nobody listen in Washington? I mean, we've been saying this for what, 10, 20 years?
As Winston Churchill said, Americans can be counted upon to do the right thing once every other alternative is exhausted. That's the sad fact.
But we're running out of time, JD. We're running out of time. We
and
can't
unfortunately,
try
we're
every
running
other
out of time on this interview, too. You see the book, An Inquiry into the Nature and Causes of the Wealth of States. Our good friend Stephen Moore. I abridged the title a little bit there, but we were glad to have Stephen here on Newsmax Prime. Other taxing discussions to come in the days ahead. Stay tuned for more. We're coming back.